a Nobody's Project production. It was always fascinating to see someone we knew and loved completely change character when they answered the phone. Their mood could be down, agitated, focused, or even aloof. Yet when that phone rang and they reached to pick up the handset or press accept on that touchscreen, their whole demeanour changed. That situation was always fascinating and a little unnerving. It then extended out as adulthood engulfed our worlds. And although it would seem quite normal and, to be perfectly honest, expected that when in a professional environment, good phone etiquette required sounding positive and calm, it continued to have a little inauthenticity about it. But that was just part of growing up and getting a stronger grip on the wider world and how each individual matures into their own adult personality. Yet even then, it still felt inauthentic. Why do some people do that instinctively and others can't? Although not linked at the time, this same inauthenticity seemed to go beyond that of just answering the phone. Some parents we would get to know through our communities were always up and engaging around those in society. But once home and behind closed doors, they were a different person. Which one was their true, or more correct, truer self? Which one better represented their inner character? How do we best conduct ourselves around these people? This conundrum was always perplexing. Do we relax and show our vulnerabilities as young growing people because we trust their up and engaging manner? Or do we stay closed and protect our inner thoughts because behind closed doors, their rougher and more abrasive characters could open us up to judgment and ridicule? Oh, the joys of trying to figure out people, especially those who didn't seem to be consistent in how they engaged with the different people and groups of people around them. And then there were those more racist types, those that showed complete love and respect for their family and their community, but just couldn't help themselves when people who didn't look like them, people who were from somewhere else, entered their orbit, be it in the community, on the news, or sports. It was a thing, a really perplexing thing. How do we square that circle? They are all people, humans, with the same needs, wants, and wishes. They may believe in a different God, or even more confusingly, they may believe in the same God, but in a different way. But they are still all people. Why did so many of those around us fail to see that and just other them? Speak to them or about them as if they weren't people, as if they shouldn't exist and are only there to make our lives worse. That just wasn't reality. We could never understand that. If they hurt, we would hurt. If they had successes, we would appreciate their successes. But no. So many, too many people around us just hated them, despised them, and othered them. This new world we were growing into just didn't make sense. Something weird was going on. If we interjected and tried to make sense of this by inquiring why people we valued, loved, and trusted couldn't help themselves but project their most negative traits onto these others, we wouldn't get a rational response. We would more often than not hear something demeaning, and at its worst, we sometimes heard comments like, "They're just animals," or "They're just not proper people." Holy fuck, did you just say that? Were our thoughts. Clearly they are people, just like us. What on earth makes you say these things? But it didn't stop there. As we ventured more and more into this westernised corporate industry and other areas of formal employment, it didn't get any better. In fact, it just got worse. These horrific views and comments no longer were reserved for those that didn't look like us. It now included those that didn't wear the right clothes, those that didn't have enough money, and those that didn't believe or behave the same way. And eventually, that included us. What the fuck was going on? Aren't we all just people? Aren't we all just trying to make our way through life? Where did all this kindness we were taught go? Why were these people dismissing who we were and what we thought and felt? Is there something wrong with us? The mental health challenges of not fitting in, not being like them, just seem to be inevitable. But that's fucked. What happened to kindness? What happened to reason and rationality? What happened to all of us being a part of something greater than our individual selves? And again, it didn't stop there. With our mature adult minds, we would challenge these thoughts, challenge these people, and the feedback was all kinds of wrong. They just couldn't pick up what we were putting down. They just couldn't provide a reasonable or rational insight that validated their decisions and behaviours. They just didn't seem to have the hardware to run this socio-emotional software that we were all told was so key to being a mature and responsible adult in this modern world. And the bit that sucked the most was that they were the ones gaining financial success. They were the ones getting promoted up these social ladders. It appeared that being an arsehole was partly key to being successful, and we just couldn't be arseholes. We cared too much about people. This world we were a part of just seemed so upside down. What the fuck happened to humanity? It just didn't seem important anymore. It just didn't seem important because it didn't make profits. And then along came the internet and social media. Our most debased character traits, our most arseholic behaviours ran rampant. Oh my God, what the fuck? It was now just two in our faces. There were now just more and more arseholes. And what made it worse was the fact that the systems were feeding this. These late 20th and early 21st century worlds were creating just too many arseholes. And when we tried to talk about this, it just seemed so normalised, so accepted, and so utterly dangerous to our collective futures, especially when some of these arseholes have their fingers on the nuclear buttons. And so we decided to lean into this problem, start to really give a shit, and fucking do something about it. Too Many Arseholes is a social project looking at the rise of pathological behaviours in our society and the erosion of social trust, creating a better conversation around why this is, and finding a way forward to a greater humanity. In this Season 1 wrap-up, we're going to go a little Wizard of Oz and let you see behind the curtain, show you some of the levers we are pulling and the buttons we are choosing to press. This podcast is also part of a larger social project that we want you, the listener, to join in on. Key to this project is bringing together threads from many academic disciplines to create a body of knowledge we can develop with you to help us all with having better conversations around these pathological behaviours in our personal and social circles. Thanks for joining us today for the Season 1 wrap-up. This is a good opportunity to step back from the heaviness of this project and podcast topics and hopefully give you a chance to take the 30,000-foot view and see why we have taken this approach. To give you a glimpse of what's in store for Season 2, and with a little luck, also provides you some of the glue that holds all these jigsaw pieces together so you can engage a little more, support a little more, and help spread this project's mission that is fundamental to making this project successful. And so thanks for joining us and coming along on this journey of reflection and discovery as we attempt to unpack and better understand why there's just too many arseholes. From the outset of this project, we acknowledged that the complexity of this range of topics we've pulled together for the TMA Social Project and podcast makes this a very challenging subject to tackle. And we as a project team had to also accept that around a third to a half of people, based on statistical evidence, just don't have the hardware to grasp these nuances and never will. But we love a challenge, and the harder the challenge, the more laser focused we become, especially when the stakes are so high. And what could be higher than existential catastrophe? So back in episode 1 and 2, we tried to define who these arseholes are. And the easiest way to describe these arseholes is that they are people who are on the pathological spectrum. But then that opens up another challenge. What is the pathological spectrum? And so we addressed that by putting forward the first TMA idea. And that is that people have different associations. These different associations can range across the pathological spectrum. It's best articulated in our newsfeed when someone, usually a male, who has a strong community persona, is also abusing their partner behind closed doors, and in some cases goes on to kill them when they try to leave. He's such a lovely guy. We had no idea this was happening, you often hear people say after the fact. This male, we suggest, has a pathological association towards women. But we couldn't just build a project around these ideas. It wasn't until we came across the scientific and neuroscience findings of the last few decades that showed clearly that there were parts of the brain, specifically these von Economo neurons in the frontal lobe, as well as other brain components, that were the hardware that ran our socio-emotional software. This wasn't just an idea, it was clearly a scientific fact. Better understanding this part of our brain was obviously going to help provide a baseline for this project, and to also help illustrate scientifically that poor antisocial behaviour wasn't a human trait, it was a neurological deficiency. And so, in pulling together the topics we thought we needed to baseline this project's subject matter on, we went down the rabbit holes of the latest neuroscience, the genetics, the early neural development our babies need, the history of how we evolved to be humans, our social maturity requirements, and how historically things traditionally, like our rites of passage, our morals and ethical compasses, our laws and sense of justice, addressed these social needs. This included how a baby's ability to mature was impacted when they encountered abuse, mistreatment and toxic environments at critical times in their early years. But then this rabbit hole went deeper. When we came across lead and all the studies over the last 50 years, the project stopped being interesting and started to take on a sense of dread. Our brain cells started to burst when we reached out to medical professionals and found out that they just didn't know about the intricacies of the impact lead has had on us all over the last 100 years. Lead just didn't seem to be a thing. But it is a thing. Why is this not taught at all schools? How has this all been forgotten? This is serious shit. And it didn't ease up after moving on from lead. We then came across all the different types of traumatic brain injury, especially sports-related TBI, the effects of long-term alcoholism, and finally, and accidentally, we fell flat-faced into dementia, and more specifically, behavioural variant frontotemporal dementia, BVFTD, which will get its own spotlight early in Season 2. Each one of these appeared to be their own podcast series, or even a book, and here we were going to attempt to tackle them all. But they all fitted together in a succinct idea that our brains, our hardware, was crucial to running our software, our socio-emotional capabilities when fully developed. It's what makes us all human. It's what got us all here over the last roughly 300,000 years. Understanding how our neurological hardware runs our socio-emotional software and what the impacts of this on us individually was just one part of the puzzle. It was the impact this was having on us collectively, our societies as a whole, that was where this actually all started. As we illustrated in the cold open, these drops in our social standards were red flags being waved furiously right in front of our eyes. It was the disregarding of our social norms, the blatant divergence of our ethics, our oaths, our trust in each other, and the loss of our stable, predictable, and safe societies was why we started being drawn into this topic, and why we felt it was important to have a crack at it. The best way to define why we felt this was so important to address and go forward via a podcast and project was because of the intense compounding of our society's global interconnectedness over the last few centuries. No longer can a problem in one continent, one country, or one city be confined to that location. As much as people want to ignore it, we are now all very globalised, and our economies need this, feed this, and expect this. Isolationism just can't be a thing, and pretending it can only creates more global harm, more global dysfunction, and more global catastrophes. COVID taught us that. Even though it looks like many people don't understand that lesson and continue to pretend we aren't almost completely globalised. And this isn't a recent thing. The lead poisoning of all continents globally from the 1920s through to the end of the century is one of the best examples of how this interconnected world links across oceans. Even people in the southernmost parts of New Zealand, a place on the other side of the world to Dayton, Ohio, were greatly impacted by lead. People in the Pacific Islands, Asia, bloody everywhere have been to some degree poisoned because of the capitalist agendas of Thomas Midgley Jr., Robert Keogh, and Charles Kettering. As a global society, we have made a number of attempts to build global institutions like the United Nations, the International Police, Interpol, the Global Environment Facility, and others, but they just don't have the teeth to actually manage global issues. As 21st century citizens, it is very embarrassing to our future humans that we can't get these so needed institutions working properly. We just can't give them the oomph they need to succeed. And with isolationism gaining ground again, we are going backwards, not forwards. And so we can continue to predict our troubles are going to get a lot worse before they get any better. And you don't need to look too far to see that it's these arseholes in power that are driving this isolationism, because they just don't want other people to stop them pursuing their own self-centered goals and agendas. And so we created this podcast and social project to have a crack at making people more aware of what's going on, giving people the words and the knowledge to start to better understand these modern challenges, and also to provide a platform to enable us all to act upon this. Awareness, understanding, and action. Too many arseholes. Give a shit and fucking do something. Step 1, Step 2, and Step 3. It's pretty straightforward, really. So what is the path forward? Well, you can and hopefully will go in a few directions based on the success of the podcast's messaging. But it's the unknown that is the most exciting part. No one person could or should predict or project our collective futures. As a project, we don't have any specific goals or agendas, as we will always base this in humanity and humane intentions. And we will always be interested in other people's own initiatives, other people's inventiveness, and other people's courageous ideas. It's only together that we will get ourselves out of this mess. It won't be easy, nor will it be simple, and most certainly we can't do it alone. We can only do this together. In essence, we can only be better together. Ralph Waldo Emerson, an American philosopher amongst other things, once said, "Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." And that pretty much sums up where this project started. We found a conversational void. People couldn't engage nor discuss other people around them that were clearly on the psychopathic spectrum, who we as a project have chosen to call arseholes. They couldn't grasp that it was a neurological deficiency and continued to fall back on the idea that it was just a human trait. There was, in English literature and research, not much we could find or read to better understand these social issues. And so we took a leap of faith, we stepped off the expected life path and decided to forge our own trail forward. And so let's share with you a little of our vision. Nothing is set in stone, but good reasoning and rational thinking indicates that to make this social project gain some heft, grow some fangs and hopefully make a difference, we first need to build a community and a body of knowledge. How that looks is really up to how we get the academic folk to join in this conversation. There is no intention within this project to just make shit up. All this knowledge only came together because of the neuroscientific research over the last few decades. Without the confirmation of how the von Economo neurons enabled socio-emotional capabilities, how we can now show that the hardware is needed to run the socio-emotional software. But this shouldn't be only accessible to English-speaking people. We intend to re-release all episodes in languages most suitable for Africa, South America, Europe, and Asia. How this evolves will come down to how well we can be funded or how generous non-English-speaking people can be to volunteer their time. This messaging is essential for everyone and hopefully not limited by language. We are also aware that podcasts aren't for everyone. There may be other forms of media that reach out to people better than just podcasts. For now though, we have chosen podcasts as this 30-minute format gives us the space to break down the information into consumable chunks. Initially we planned 45-minute to 1-hour episodes, but one of the earliest decisions we made during the beta stage of producing this first podcast series was to reduce the episode length to 30 minutes. 45 minutes or more just seemed to be too heavy for the content we were covering. It was one of the best decisions we made at that early stage. For those that made this recommendation, and you know who you are, thanks for insisting we did this. It was also important for this social project to know who our target audience is. Anyone producing content, whether it be digital or physical, should know their audience to help keep the content focused, directed, and relevant. And so we pictured our target audience to be any adult from around 30 to 35 years and over. Essentially anyone who has matured, according to the latest scientific findings, to their most mature age. We have also found that in these initial stages that many people just can't grasp these subjects and topics. That's okay by us. They seem to just not have the hardware to understand this content focused on the higher socio-emotional condition. Bridging this gap in the future will be a challenge the TMA project is willing to have a crack at. But for now, just spreading the knowledge and potentially the wisdom we are proposing is enough of a challenge in these early stages. It's one thing to read research papers and to put them together for each episode. It's another thing to bring academics and industry professionals to the conversational table. Without their brilliance, we wouldn't know what we now know. And yes, the title, Too Many Arseholes, is a little abrasive to those academic folk, but so are the topics we are taking on. And there will be many nuances we just won't understand without academic oversight. To pinch a perspective from Patrick Wyman from the Tides of History podcast episode, Popular History and Academic History, released on the 19th of March 2026. Popular history is at its best to be consumed by everyone. It's engaging and focused on the story that we as humans can easily digest. Academic history is the knowledge. It is the facts and it's the academic history that gives us all these better insights into our past. The better a content creator or author can know the academic history, the more successful and more widely spread the popular history will be. We can't have one without the other, nor should they be confused with each other. This podcast is popular social science, popular neuroscience, and popular anthropology at its core. We are not academics and we don't want to be seen as academics. But we need academics and the amazing work they do to baseline the knowledge we are putting forward. And we also need academics to provide the guardrails and explain the nuances that we just will never see. So we hope as we grow this project, we can get more academic people on board and provide the guidance a project of this nature needs to reach its mission. And there are many other goals we hope to strive for. Some of these we will dive deeper into over Season 2, wrapping our heads around the latest fMRI and brain scanning technologies, dissecting the toxic social media and the work cultures we see gaining ground over the last few decades, unpacking our local, state, provincial, territorial and national government and their ineptness to lead us through these strange times. And the list goes on and on. But we won't list everything today. We'll need to keep some of it for the future. But all of this can only be possible if one thing can happen, and that is we need more support. We need to be well funded, we need to be well resourced, and we need to spread the messaging that is primary to this project's mission. The biggest change for Season 2 is that we are renaming the social project A Greater Humanity, but we'll also keep the podcast as Too Many Arseholes. This actually explains things a little better, as we start with Too Many Arseholes with a hope that we end up at A Greater Humanity, and that is the journey that we're all taking together. Lastly, our vision is not held by us alone. As this script was being put together in late May 2026, someone else, who's quite well known globally, also pushed his vision for the future of our global humanity, and the parallels are striking. On May the 15th, Pope Leo XIV signed his encyclical letter Magnificat Humanitas, which was then subsequently published on the 25th of May. For those of you that don't know your Latin, Magnificat Humanitas in English means greater humanity. This just under 30,000 word document is focused on the future of humanity and the challenges we now face with AI and those deciding on its place in our world. The parallels between his document and some of the key themes of this project are astounding, unnerving, and humbling to say the least. But these challenges are for all of us, for anyone with a voice and the energy to stand up, speak up, and add to the essential social discourse to keep our collective humanity at the centre of all our lives. Thank you, Pope Leo, for your efforts. You've given us another episode idea for Season 2. Before we wrap up this season's wrap-up, let's give you a little look into what's in store for next season. Initially, we were planning Season 2 to be firmly anchored in the second stage of the social project, understanding, or known within the TMA team as give a shit. But there is just so much more we can cover off in creating more awareness of what is actually going on. So we're going to do both. We're going to dip our toe into the warm bath waters of Stage 2 of this project and start to discuss and better understand all the contributors impacting on our societies, on all of us individually and collectively. We're also going to keep the breathing apparatus on that is Stage 1 of this social project. We're going to do this so we can continue to dive deep into solidifying all the topics that are required to baseline this fundamental knowledge needed to correctly interpret and ground this project in good, sound knowledge. So, what's installed? Well, we plan to open Season 2 by highlighting a personal story that has been instrumental in better understanding what it is like to see firsthand what happens when these social-emotional neurons start to fail to work properly, how this impacts on an individual and those they love. We have also scheduled a few 2 to 3 part mini-series looking at the almost redundant social structures of oaths and promises, the runaway trains that are our corporate organisations and financial heroin. Social media will get its dues, and so will politics. We'll try to tackle right and wrong and good versus evil. We will keep looking for better words and better ways to have these better conversations and how to better handle all these unwitting socio-psychopaths that allow our biggest nut jobs to get into and maintain their power. To keep diving into the understanding required for this social project's success, we are planning on getting right into the latest technology that will help us keep this challenge rooted in strong science. And we will unpack how this individualism has evolved to the painful levels we currently see across our cultures today. And we can't leave the topic of lead where we left it at the end of episode 20. So we've currently scheduled a few more episodes to keep pushing how horrific it has contributed to all this social decay. Both episodes 19 and 20 could have honestly been 1 to 2 hours long each. But we didn't want to go too deep on these heavy subjects, and so we kept them to the 30-minute format and parked many of the other important lines of discussion for when our brains have recovered somewhat. One of the more curly subjects we hope to include next season will be that third of our lives that often gets missed, our work environments. In preparing this initial research, we found how actually upside down people's expectations are of psychosociopaths in the workplace. And we are looking forward to taking you back to the upside down and showing you how completely opposite we see psychopathic traits actually infect our workspaces and who we work with. And so this season has now come to an end, and we have covered off all the important subjects to ground the social project in solid facts and the latest science. But next season, it gets real. If Season 1 was a bit of a roller coaster, then Season 2 will be more like a paint mixer in a cement mixer at a sewage farm. We're all going to get covered in colourful shit, and if we stop, it's all going to become a colourful and very smelly mess we may get stuck in for life. Next season, we start to really give a shit. We look forward to you joining us in mid-August, so grab the popcorn and tissues and fasten your seatbelt for the next wild ride. Thanks again for taking the time to join in and coming behind the curtain for a little look at what's behind this social project and podcast, how we are pulling this all together, and what you can do to help propel us forward down this untrodden path. It will only be better together, and so on behalf of the TMA team, We thank you from the bottom of our hearts for joining us and letting us put some meat on the bones that is this conversational void. And so let's finish off this season with where it all started. Many, many years ago, we came across a meme posted on a board in an office in another time long ago in a place that now feels so far, far away. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anyone could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought that anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. Thanks, Charles R. Swindoll. We couldn't have said it any better. Too Many Arseholes is researched, written, and produced by Nobody's Project. To put this series together, we have drawn on many sources, publications, books, and podcasts. Throughout this series, we will ask you to go and read or listen to an article, book, or podcast to accompany our episodes. Check out our show notes for recommendations for upcoming episodes and also for our sources. It is important that we acknowledge and promote the people and the work they have published that has inspired this project. And finally, we are always keen to hear from you. Do you have an experience, idea, or insight that you'd love to share with the project? If so, please send an email to contactus@toomanyarseholes.com. Visit our social media pages and please feel free to get in contact and have a better conversation with us. To support the project, you can go to our Patreon page where you can get more information on the project and support us. You can also join our Patreon group and get early and ad-free episodes as well as other benefits. You can also like, subscribe, and review the podcast to help spread the conversation. And the best way to support us is to share the podcast with your family and friends and colleagues so you can have a better conversation with them. Until we catch up again, give a shit about our planet, and in the words of Taika Waititi, be a nice person, live a good life, and just don't be an arsehole.